things about me.
Our next roaster is another man all the chefs and restaurateurs in this room will recognize, and all of you will recognize his byline. He is currently the national editor of the New York Times. He formerly was, after Mr. Bruni, was the restaurant critic of the New York Times. Please welcome Mr. Sam Sifton.
Good evening. Alan, how you holding up? Oh, you look good. You look like you always look. You know, it's funny. 25 years at a men's magazine, he still looks like an extra on Law and Order. One of Alan's first articles, because he did work at the paper for 2 years. One of his first articles, indeed I think his first article, was on the front page of the New York Times, which is how we sometimes do it. It ran in February 1979. You remember this? It concerned a federal lawsuit where the NAACP was suing to prevent the building of a low-income housing project on Staten Island. And there's definitely a punchline in there somewhere. I'm not sure that Alan has ever been to Staten Island. But he did do a good job, and it seemed to indicate the start of a great career. A1 story. But, boy, he must have pissed someone off. And I'm guessing that it was Tony's mom. Gladys Bourdain, a really legendary editor at the New York Times with a legendary temper, and I'm not suggesting that Alan is Bourdain's father. I'm not. I don't think the math might work. Whatever happened in those first few months.
It was the 60s.
Before long, Alan was not a page 1 writer. He was more like a page B22 writer. His job, as near as I can figure, was to write these metro features of the kind that we editors assign to reporters we want to force out and send to magazines of the kind that you would read in, waiting for a massage. But thanks for dinner. Someone sent Alan out to spend 3 nights on the subway, midnight until dawn, just to see if he'd get mugged. And he wasn't mugged, so the story didn't make it to A1. He did have a moment. He was sent out to cover the Pope. But as near as I can figure, it was only because it was outside and it was pouring rain. People are soaked was in the headline. And by the early 1980s, Alan's career at the Times was in a full-on death spiral, bound for GQ. So here are the headlines on 2 of his last articles. The first, $33,000 in old coins returned by priceless cabbie. The cabbie, as it turns out, was Art Cooper. And it's not true about returning the money. Second, guest stabs a woman in nearby apartment, then jumps to death. That was Alan's first review of M. Wells. About which I want to be very clear. I've spent a lot of time with Alan. He has never touched me. He has whined, he's complained, he's pleaded, but no more than that. As his writing in the magazine shows, he's an instrument of the cosseted, over-moneyed patriarchy in every other way. But he's not handsy. He's just not. Maybe he's John Mariani with better sentence structure. But Mr. Grabby Hands, not around. I want to talk, though, a little bit about what I learned from Alan about the importance of anonymity in restaurant criticism. I learned very little. He taught me nothing on this subject. I want to tell you the story of my first night working as restaurant critic for the New York Times. I went to Danielle. I used a false name and a phone number to make the reservation. Times critics always do that. I believe that night I was Chuck Scarborough. My guests and I were seated at a nice little table right in the middle of the room. Mario Batali was there. He was seated in a corner booth. His family was there. I think it was his son's birthday. Mario was getting very good service. So was I. I mean, for one thing, it's Danielle. You get good service even if you look like Joe Bastianich. I'm pretty sure, however, that there was a microphone in the flowers and some sort of camera down on my face. I mean, but at least Daniel and I were observing this sort of social contract that governs the transactions between the anonymous Times critic and the restaurants he covers. I knew, he knew, I knew, he knew. I dined in peace. Alan Richman, on the other hand, over on the other end of the room, at a corner table that could have seated a dozen people, under a sign that, as I remember, it said, Alan Richman, GQ magazine, sat Alan Richman, displaying the fealty that has kept him employed at GQ for 25 years. Alan was not sitting with his wife, but with Michael Haney. He jackknifed at every joke Haney told. They might have been lovers, or at least maybe a prostitute and a John who requested someone older, maybe from the outer boroughs. And they were surrounded by 24 waiters. Alan had a notebook in front of him the size of a billboard. He had a quill pen that looked like this microphone. It was like Anton Ego. He wrote nothing down. These, it appeared to me, were just props to get Danielle to come out with the duck press again. I kept looking over, and Alan wore this expression of delight. He looked like a child. He signaled for more wine. I thought, if all chefs understood how to play this kind of instrument, Alan might have had a different relationship with the city of New Orleans. Alan, I want to close seriously, as everyone else has. If you had an accent and some clown shoes, you could have done the Julian thing. But no, you chose the harder way, with the expense account. The deadlines, once a month. No, but seriously, folks, I'd heard Cy was going to pig slip you at the beginning of the meal. But here you are, hanging on till dessert. I love you, Alan Richman. Let's raise a glass to him. One of the greatest.